Hello and welcome. This is Cataclysm, a Second World War, and I'm playing a solitaire playthrough of the Days of Decision scenario. Days of Decision is about the run-up to war and the early days of World War II in Europe. It's set only in Western Europe, so it pits the United Kingdom and France, the democracies, against the fascists, Germany and Italy, starting in 1937 and running through about 1941, 1942, depending on when the scenario decides to end. It's going to be random based on a draw. What we've got here is the rivalry between the United Kingdom and France and the German-Italian axis. To win this scenario, the fascists need to have a score of twice what the Democrats have. So the Democrats currently have a score of 5. Fascists would need to be up to 10 or more in order to win the scenario if the scenario ended right now. And there's another condition that'll end the scenario, and that's having an enemy power surrender. So if a power from one ideology surrenders, the other ideology wins. Most likely that means a surrender of France or Italy. France or Italy are the most fragile powers on the board. It is possible we could see an invasion of the UK or of Germany proper. It's just less likely because these are tougher and less brittle powers. Okay, so there's a few special rules in this scenario. There are 2 extra resources that the democracies may be able to get. One is from the Pacific, from the UK's holdings in the Pacific, which are, say, Australia and India. They get to collect, while belligerent only, one resource through connector D here. So in order to trace this connector back to the capital of the UK, where they would actually do their production, they'd have to trace it through the Arabian Sea, through Egypt, through the various Mediterranean spaces, and then through the North Atlantic to get to the UK. That means that if, say, the Mid-Atlantic Ocean, Western Med, Aegean Sea, or Egypt are seized by the Italians, supply would be imperiled. So that's an important consideration for the United Kingdom. Another consideration is that they will have access to the Lend-Lease. Once there is war in play, so once someone is at war, and that would be one of the democracies, the United States is going to be giving 1 industrial resource per turn to either the UK or France, and it's my choice, the democracy's choice, so my choice. So that means the democracies have a couple extra resources. They aren't quite as broke as they look in this scenario. The Germans, on the other hand, have 2 permanent resources. So there's 1 permanent resource in the Ruhr and 1 in Berlin. They also have 2 limited resources, 1 in the Ruhr and 1 in Sweden. And what's more, they have the ability to conquer Poland, to conquer Czechoslovakia and Romania, maybe Yugoslavia. That would give them quite a few more resources, which would be very nice for the Germans. If they're going to be playing the long game here, they are going to probably want to mobilize and just get going as soon as they can. Italy, on the other hand, is pretty broke. They have only 1 permanent resource and 1 limited resource pilfered from Ethiopia. So they're not going to have a lot of options for funding. They might be able to take Provence or Yugoslavia, perhaps Spain. We could see. Speaking of Spain, it's not just the place where the Spanish are based, but it's the site of the Second Spanish Civil War. So this is going on, or the Spanish Civil War between the Second Republic and Franco's fascist forces. On the right-hand side, on the right faction, we have Germany and Italy helping, and the Soviets are helping on the left. So that means if the Soviets were to win, if the Soviet-friendly faction was to win this war, this would become a Soviet protectorate if they won a decisive victory. Or it could become an Italian or a German ally. That could be significant because it's kind of a backdoor into France. If the Italians were to base units in Spain, they could invade France right through Brittany and right into Paris, which could be pretty bad for the French. Pretty bad indeed. Okay, so I want to go through and look at the individual powers in this scenario. The Soviet Union, all the communist countries, the Soviets, are out of play. So all the red territory is out of play. But the Soviets do have a role in this game. There's a rule called Soviet enmity, which means that every time a player provokes the Soviet Union, they take a red cube, so one of these. So if the Germans invaded Poland, they'd take a red cube for that invasion, and they'd take a red cube if they actually succeeded in taking Poland, and then they'd be at 2. for the fascists. So what happens at the end is the Germans, the fascists are going to divide by 3, rounded down. The democracies are going to divide their cubes by 5, rounded down, their red cubes. And that's how many dice you have to roll for Soviet enmity. So potentially, just 3 provocations to the Soviets could mean a loss of 1 to 6 VP. That's pretty bad for the Germans and Italians. So they're probably going to want to win by knockout in this game by taking out one of the democracies. In which case the points won't really matter. But if the game does go long, the points are going to become important. So that could be a really big concern for the democracies. For the fascists. Somewhat less of a concern for the democracies since they have a higher threshold before they get in the actual Soviet enmity. But we'll see. One other rule I haven't mentioned is that Pearl Harbor happens when this offensive is drawn in 1941-1942 turn. That offensive is going to end the game. It indicates that the war has become global and United States and Japan get into the act. So that's the moment which the game is called. So if it gets to that point, fascists win if they have at least twice the points of the democracies. I should also say Germany has the wrong point value in this scenario. They should have 1 point since they have Sweden. Italians have 2. British have 2, which are Iraq and Jordan. And the French have 3. They're allies in Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, which unfortunately they can't do much to defend. They really can't get any units over to Czechoslovakia or Poland, even if they'd really like to. Okay, so that's a little overview of the situation. I want to go through the powers just a little bit. So Italy here is fragile. They have effectiveness 1, except when they use their Il Duce flag. They are navally inferior. They are militarily pretty weak in terms of their army and air force, but they still pose a significant threat to the British interests in the Mediterranean, and they can help with the invasion of France, should it come to that. They really have ambition to take over Yugoslavia if possible. Spain would be nice too. That could all help because it would give them extra resources to work with. As for their war effort, they probably don't want to go to total war because they'll be at such a high chance of collapsing. It could be that they go to mobilization and stay there. It is going to be true that Germany and Italy are going to want to ally with each other as soon as possible, because that means they go to war together, and that can be very powerful. Okay, France here is also very brittle because they have effectiveness 1. They have no way of getting better effectiveness, so that's going to be tough for them. France and the United Kingdom, I should say, are going to try to ally as soon as possible because it'll help if they get attacked. But if France is not allied with anyone and Germany and Italy both attacked at the same time, France is probably dead meat, and that would end the scenario quickly due to French collapse, most likely. So France is already wavering, so they often have a very hard time staying stable in this game, and I don't think this game is going to be an exception. The United Kingdom here has interests both in the Mediterranean and in Northern Europe, so they really need to make sure the North Sea stays theirs in order to prevent the Germans from doing anything, like an invasion of England. Currently, the Germans have a big enough army and air force, they could indeed attempt to invade England if they were at war. They would just need to place a fleet in the North Sea first. So that's a concern. But they also want to make sure they keep the supply lines through the Mediterranean open. If Italy goes wild and takes over, say, Egypt and Jordan and Iraq, that could be bad news for the democracies. Yeah. So they basically have a two-front war to be focusing on, unlike some of the other powers in this scenario. Germany has ambitions to conquer the eastern territories, especially Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Romania, which all have resources. Currently, those are all French, but they probably won't stay French for very long. The French have a hard time holding on to them. And the strategy for Germany is basically smash into France and do as much damage as possible, so the French get disasters, so they lose territories, and ultimately the French will collapse and surrender, is the idea. And of course, that's what happened historically when the Germans stormed northern France. We'll see if that comes to pass in this scenario. So, I think we should jump into the administration phase. First off, is the status quo marker is still in play. This means that the democracies have trouble gaining political power, and they won't gain a flag at the beginning of the turn unless they want to take a stability check. Probably not a great idea since they already have some flags, and France is at low stability already and probably won't pass a stability check, so that could be the end of France pretty quickly. So they won't take any flags. Italy and Germany, on the other hand, will take their flags, so Il Duce comes into play. Germany gets 2 flags because of the Knight of the Long Knives ability. Okay, now it's production time. So I'll go in increasing order of effectiveness here. France is lowest, and they have the decision to make whether they should go for the Dreadnought refit or not. I'm thinking I'm going to go for it this time because the Dreadnought can be very useful in helping keep the Italians at bay in the Mediterranean. France could go to the North Atlantic, but I don't think that's very profitable. I guess they could base them in Paris and do something up here, but I don't know about that. But they are going to refit this Dreadnought and place it into play next turn. And they have one more build with their permanent resource in Provence, so they'll build a air force. Italy is up first. So Italy only has one permanent resource. They'll use it to build their army. Not very interesting. The United Kingdom has 2 permanent resources, one from UK, one from London, and one from Canada. I think they're going to go for a tank upgrade for this one. This tank upgrade can be a very useful opener for the UK since it means there's... What happened? It means there's a lot more pressure on the UK in... this isn't good. Let me restart this here. Okay, I rebooted. Says the scenario had some trouble, so we'll do those. We'll do those builds again. Italy gets 1 flag. Germany gets 2 flags, and France is going to refit their Dreadnought and place a plane into the production holding box. UK is going to put an army in. I think the problem that I was having with Vassal here was that Vassal gets a little weird when you start doing undos, and I had undone a lot of moves. It's part of the magic of Java, I think. Anyway, that's enough about that. We also have to notice that there's this Stresa Front in play. Stresa Front is a alliance, well, not a true alliance, but a relationship or an agreement between Italy and the French and UK against the Germans. So as soon as either the UK and France get allied, or the Italians and Germany get allied, the Stresa Front is going to go away. Until then, they can't do things that would provoke each other. So that means no diplomatic actions into Switzerland or Austria, for instance. Not going to be that big a deal in this game, but it's something that does matter. Status quo gets deleted if anybody goes to war, or if Italy or Germany gets to mobilization, or if the fascists have more points than the Democrats at any point. Then the democracies start to get serious about the war. Before that, the democracies are banned from going to mobilization, and they can't... there's a lot of stuff they can't do. They can't collect a flag. They can't collect from controlled countries like Romania and so on. Okay, so that's about it for... we got Italian production, which is 1 troop. And then the German production here is going to be... Germany, I think, is going to want to put a lower tech army into play because they have a large force pool and they want to take advantage of it now. So they'll put a army and a plane into production holding. At this point, we put flags into reserve, or whatever into reserve, but in this case, it's going to be flags. France can't put that tank into that fortress into reserve. Fortresses can't go in reserve as much as they would like to. Italy is going to put Il Duce into play into their reserve. probably the best move for them because it'll help increase their effectiveness when they roll. So, okay, so we're at the point at which someone is going to interrupt. Now, my feeling here is that it's a question of whether to go for an alliance between the Axis powers first or to go for mobilization first. Both of them give provocations to the French and the UK. Germany mobilizing will provoke the Soviets, and we don't want to provoke the Soviets too much. Unfortunately, just Germany joining an alliance and the act of Germany doing an alliance with Italy and the act of Germany mobilizing, those together will give the fascists 2 red cubes just by themselves. So that's almost a die worth of VP loss from the Soviets, which isn't good, but I think there's no getting around it. So, oh yeah, and I want to make sure to put these units into the Action Cup. I always forget about this, and it screws up my turns big time. All right, so everything's in the Action Cup. Germany, I think, is going to go for an interrupt. And they're going to go for an increased commitment. Not necessarily not the only choice here, but might be the best one here. Yeah, so let's go for an increased commitment with Germany. Well, I don't know. Germany isn't wavering already, so that could be potentially a problem. The Germans could also go for propaganda as their first move, and that would just improve the stability most likely. So they'll do that. Propaganda. They get a 6 and succeed. So German stability is up. Next in the interrupt order, should they choose to interrupt, is the UK. And I think the UK is going to go ahead and wait on that. No, I think what they'll do is try to form an alliance with France. Having that alliance is really critical, and it means that France can, well, I don't know. We could always just let the Italians interrupt and then let France go. Oh, Italians can't interrupt now. So let's have France interrupt, and the Italians can't interrupt because the fascists just moved. So France is going to interrupt for propaganda. They succeed. Nice. Everybody's steady now. And Il Duce, I think, will go ahead and... I think we're going to see Italy try to mobilize here. Because Italy would just love to go on an offensive against Yugoslavia, do a sneak attack on Provence as soon as possible. Yeah, let's try that. So Italy is going to go for 2d6 for a commitment increase. They succeed. Italy is now at mobilization. So they're going to get 1 commitment offensive from their permanent resource, their permanent industrial resource. They are going to, however, tick off France and the UK. France will take this flag to reserve. And the UK will take it to the cup, the Action Cup. Okay. So that effectively ends status quo. It's a very early end to status quo, but I think it's fine for this game because we'll see some action early. Okay. So in response to that, the democracies are going to try and ally with each other. So this is a long shot, but the democracies may need to roll a couple times to get this alliance up. Even so, it's probably a good idea because if they don't ally, France can be in big trouble. So they'll try to ally. It's 1d6. Oh, and they fail. That's a shame of cube for both of them to the alliance box. Did I say shame of cube? I mean cube of shame. So sad. Okay, so now no one is ready to interrupt. Since the UK and France did not form an alliance successfully, that means Germany and Italy were not provoked. You know what I should also do is add some units to Italy's force pool. I forgot about that. So Italy is going to be able to build some new forces. Italy is very poor and probably doesn't have a lot of money for fancy tanks, fancy carriers, fancy bombers. Instead, what they're going to build is just 1 fighter and 1 infantry. You also note that most of the terrain that Italy is likely to be fighting in is adverse terrain. So Germany and France can make good use of tanks. Italy can't really, because if they invade Provence, Yugoslavia, North Africa here, whatever, they're not going to be able to get any armor advantage because of the adverse terrain. Okay, so Italy puts some shit in its force pool. Should probably bleep that out. Okay, let's go. Let's see what we're doing here. What do we draw first? Okay, we draw a crisis. So we are still at peace, and it's Crisis 6-4, the Scandinavian League. This is one that forces everybody with an ungarrisoned, controlled country in the Nordics, so that would be Denmark, Norway, Sweden, or Finland, to make an effectiveness check or lose the country. So Germany will make an effectiveness check, and they succeed. Okay, so no one gets kicked out of the Scandinavia just yet. All right, just want to see something here. Make sure I got all my German stuff in there. Yeah, okay. Let's see what else we got. Crisis again. This is Crisis 6-3, a Balkan Pact. Powers with a cube in ungarrisoned Romania, Yugoslavia, or Turkey. So that's France, and they have to do the same thing. So France is probably not going to make this. We'll see. France fails big time. So France has lost control of Romania. That's bad news for France, because that makes it easier. Well, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but the Axis will have designs in Romania if they can get there. Yugoslavia and Turkey are uncontrolled, so those don't get affected. Here's a British flag. I think the British had better use this flag to... Well, our options are... We should probably want to save it for an alliance. So, unfortunately, the French don't have any flags available. I mean, they don't have any flags in the cup, while the British have another flag in the cup. But, well, we'll gamble that that Italy will mobilize. I mean, that Germany will mobilize. You know, I think I did not remember to take provocation flags from no, did I? Let's see. France had one flag. They got one flag from provocation. They used one for propaganda, one for alliance. So I think I think they don't have flags. They did get provoked successfully. So I think UK is going to hold on to this one. They would really like to get that alliance up as soon as possible. Another crisis. This is 6-3. The Balkan Pact again. Well, this doesn't have any effect because all the Balkans are uncontrolled. Here's that Italian Navy. Stacking the Navy together makes sense because they can both be operated with one military action. They can both be activated for an operation with one military action. For instance, a base capture of Malta would be smart. Here's a Civil War resolution. So the left side of the Spanish Civil War is going to roll 2, and the right is going to roll 3. So it's 2 versus 3. Okay, so the right has a marginal victory. They don't have double their enemies' numbers, but okay, I think we're back. But yeah, if they had no aid here, then they would have lost the war. But instead, the Soviet subordinate faction just gets weaker. Okay, so that was the Civil War resolution. UK could interrupt, but again, I think we're waiting on a provocation to the French to put that alliance into place. UK could pressure the French and thereby get a flag for the use of the alliance, but that has the problem that it would get rid of these cubes of shame. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't with the French situation. Here's the German home front. They'll roll 3d6. They pass. Germany would like to do some rearranging of its troops so they can start to invade. Czechoslovakia and Poland, Romania, and so on. So they will. The troops in this position also threaten the French. though Germany can't declare war until they're mobilized. Here's that British tank upgrade. I think I'm going to put that here in Libya. Not a bad move because it really threatens adjacent to Libya in Egypt, to threaten the Italians in Libya. So at this point, the British are pretty overmatched with their Centurions versus the Italian rifles. And they could most likely overrun the Italian troops in Libya. They would roll 2, and the Italians would roll 1 if there's no air superiority in play. So that's a significant threat that puts more pressure on the Italians. Here's a German flag. I think the Germans are going to go for... Well, I'm of a couple minds here. The Germans could go for mobilization, which will tick off the... It'll tick off the French and the English, but who will then be able to try and form another alliance. But having that mobilization is just so valuable. I don't know if there's any good reason not to. And we already had the German home front, so I think there's a good reason to do so. So they'll try to mobilize. They succeed. Okay, now Germany and Italy are prepped for war, and the war could very well start this turn. Oh, sorry, this offensive should have gone to the holding blocks. Italy will take that to its reserve. Sorry for that. So we have an interesting scenario here where Germany and... So we could see a very early war, a war starting in late 1937. Germany gets one resource, 2 commitment offensives, and they get to put 4 more units in their force pool. So they're going to put... Germany's never going to build out this whole force pool, but it's nice that they have it at least. They'll buy an army, another plane, a fleet? I don't know. How about a 3rd army? How about for the 3rd unit an army, and then another tank upgrade in case they really want to build some tanks. So this is a huge force pool for Germany that they're not going to get around to building since this isn't a very late running scenario. That's okay though. Germany has the option to use up the Ruhr. What is this? The limited resource of the Ruhr, in order to make a 3rd offensive. That might actually be wise in this case because that 3rd offensive could really come in handy. So I think they will burn this Ruhr limited resource. Because what the hell? Okay, so they'll burn this. Not flip it, but get rid of it. And they'll get another offensive to their production holding box. So now we've got 2 offensives in the cup, 1 in reserve, and Germany is ready to go for a bit of a war. We'll put this in the action cup. Now, France and UK are provoked by this action. So UK takes it to the action cup, France takes it to the reserve, and UK will interrupt to attempt to form another alliance. Let's hope for a good roll here. They get a 4, and the 4 would be high enough. It would not be high enough, except that they have these cubes of shame, the failed political action bonus. So it actually is high enough, and they form an alliance just in time. Now there's an alliance between France and the UK. So, here's what's going on here. Germany and Italy aren't formally allied, though the Stresa Front is done because their democratic opponents are allied. But Germany may be in a better position to go to war than Italy, and if they go to war now, they'll go to war alone. I think it's worth it. I think it's probably worth it to try and do that sneak attack. Just want to look something up here about how surprise attacks work exactly. Because I think we're just going to go for the surprise attack. France is going to mobilize in response most likely, but if we're really lucky, we can knock France out in an early blitzkrieg, and that would have huge ramifications. So Yeah, let's go for it. Okay, so we'll attempt to attack France with. Actually, it's a good question of whether we want to attack them with Germany or with Italy. That either one could interrupt right now. But Italy is less prepared to go to war with Britain, so let's have just Germany attempt to attack. So they'll do a surprise attack that takes a military action, and then the French are going to fight at -1 for this first battle, since they're surprised. Even better than this might have been to go through Benelux, but these troops aren't in a position to attack Benelux, so that's not happening. Okay, so they'll go for it. Commit to armies versus the French army. The French had better support with this plane. So we'll roll 2 versus 2 -1. Well, let's see. It might be wise to augment this one for more damage. Now, we'll hope for a breakthrough. So 2 versus 2 -1. Germans roll 6. French roll a 3. Oh, that's going to hurt them because that destroys the Air Force. And the British can cover Paris, but they can't cover Lorraine here. Okay, so that means it's going to be 3 versus 2 -1 in the ground combat phase. So Germans roll a 4, French roll a 5 -1 is a 4. Both sides lose an army, but that's worse for the Germans. That's worse for the French than it is for the Germans, because if they lose their army, that means that was the last army standing in the way of sorry, that was the last army that was standing in the way of Paris. So France suffers a stability hit. Let's see if they make it. They succeed. So France stays steady, even though Germany has taken over Lorraine. So Germany's score increases by 1. France's score decreases by 1. France is now down to 1, while Germany is up to 2. And democracy is getting concerned. Because of that provocation, the UK gets a flag. France gets 2 flags because they were not only attacked but surprise attacked. The UK would get 2 flags if they had them. And France is going to take one of its flags to its reserve box. However, the forces of Germany have another attack to make. So they could let's see. If they attack Paris, it'll be contested air superiority. Probably the UK will still have air superiority and so that would be 2 versus 2. If they attacked into Provence, it would be 3 versus 2 plus 1. So I'm thinking the Provençal attack is probably a better move here. They can always regroup back into Lorraine, but knocking out Provence would be big. Let's try it. So with the second attack, I'm moving into Provence. There is no enemy air support here, sadly for them. So that's going to be 3 versus 2 plus 1. Germans roll a 6. French roll a 4. Not good enough. So they can retreat their army to Paris, but they can't. And the Germans will regroup to Lorraine after they take the territory. But that means French have to retreat here. They'll send this fleet back to North Africa. And the Germans get another victory while the oh shoot, I should have been taking the German flags for victory here. I keep forgetting rules. Okay, so the Germans get 2 flags for their 2 victories, and the French suffer another stability check. They don't make it. So the French are now wavering, and they're going to be doing worse once Paris has fallen. Okay, so that was a fascist move. Now it's the UK is up for a move. This is a tough one here because if Paris falls, that might be the end of France. But if the UK doesn't mobilize, they can't really fight the war very well. So, they don't have to interrupt, but they probably want to. I think the UK is going to go for mobilization. So they're going to attempt to mobilize. Actually, they don't have to attempt to because they're already at war. Right, I should put the war things here to remember who's at war. No, not Italy, but Germany, UK, and France. Okay, so the UK is going to mobilize. That's going to give them 3 more units in their force pool, which they'll take with an army and an air force. Let's get a strategic force, too. I think that might come in handy. UK also gets 1 commitment offensive, which they'll put in their reserve because they want to do that offensive as soon as possible. Okay. Now the fascists are up for a move. What does Italy want to do here? I mean, if Italy wants to do anything, we could also just do maneuvers with the Germans and try and knock it out altogether. No, Germany is too weak to make it to win Paris. They'd probably be at 2 versus 3. That wouldn't be good for them. And this German offensive is done. All right. Well, we definitely want one of the fascists to interrupt. Oh yeah, but Italy and Germany aren't friendly to each other yet. They're friendly, but they're not allied. So that's annoying. I guess Italy will try and attack. Let's go for Yugoslavia. No, that's dumb right now. Let's Yeah, let's go for Yugoslavia. Italy won't enter the war just yet. They're going to try and get the Yugoslavian resource first. So, we're going to invade Yugoslavia at +1 augmentation. Bizarrely, this doesn't actually, as far as I can tell, this doesn't actually provoke anyone. So no one really minds if you invade Yugoslavia, apparently. So that's going to be in the air. There's no opposition. So it's going to be 3 + 1 versus 2 + 1. 3 + 1 is 6. 2 + 1 is 7. So the Yugoslavs win the victory, and the Italians don't lose anything, but they're forced to retreat. That's too bad for them. Now we have the option to interrupt with either. Oh, yeah, and I should put that limited war marker into play. We have the option to interrupt with either of the democracies. And I think that's a good idea here. So limited war is now in play. We won't see a global war since the communists can't declare war in this game. All right. What do we got? Well, the UK could counter-invade. That's not the worst idea. See, they could, if the UK could have a ship in, no, it's not really a great idea. Let's see. So one option for the UK is to, I think they better just send their guy to Paris. It's not very interesting, but okay. So they're gonna send They can't get to Benelux. Shoot. Okay, so the UK has two military actions from this. The first military action, they're going to get this army and one plane to Paris for support there, leaving one plane in London. They're going to put this carrier here in the North Sea. They'll put the fleet in the North Sea and keep the carrier for operations. And then what? They have another military action too. They could bring this tank home and put it in Paris. Actually, that's a pretty good idea. I mean, it sort of cedes Egypt to the Libyans, but Egypt's a colony. It's not that big a deal. I don't know. Maybe it is a big deal because it is that one resource they would lose, and the Italians could overrun the Middle East, and that'd be bad, sort of. Yeah, why don't they put this tank up here in preparation for an invasion of Germany? And this should be enough units to hold off the Germans for now. It's not great because they have to avoid... they have to abandon Egypt effectively. But what are you going to do? As for this other fleet, we can have it deployed to... Egypt, where the Aegean Sea to patrol and watch out for any Italian supply to Libya. That'll put these guys out of supply, which is going to make them fight worse if they do want to invade Egypt. Yeah, good idea. Okay, so that's that's one move for the UK. They get two, and with the second one, they're going to build another army. So they'll put this army into. No, they'll build another air force. So they'll put this air force into play. Into the reserve, not into play. Okay, we're going to build one of these in the reserve. Okay. Germany is now in a tough position because their offensive didn't knock out France. France isn't about to crumble. And it's kind of a long shot for if they could defeat the Parisians there. So if they go on the attack here, they could augment by one, but they couldn't do that without a defensive. They would need, not with the flags at least. What if we keep that flag around and just draw from the cup and hope for the best? Yeah, democracies just went, so we'll see. Okay, so that's good. A German offensive. I think the Germans are going to go for it. I mean, I haven't exactly played this brilliantly because the Germans are kind of bogged down here without the ability to do a lot of damage to the French without any Italian intervention. But it might be better than nothing. So they'll go in against the Parisians. The UK decided to put this tank up in UK, which hopefully will be their undoing. Okay, so this is rolling at, and the UK will support in this battle. So the air forces are at 2+1 versus 2. 2+1 versus 2. Oh. So Germany managed a 6 in this roll, while I only rolled 1 for the anime. And geez, that's even worse. So 2d6, it makes 6 for the Germans and only 2 for the British. So that shoots down both the British Air Forces. That's 3 hits. That's really bad for the. I said German again. That shoots down both the UK Air Forces. So the British have lost their Air Force entirely. It's been shot down in the Battle of France. Now they're risking being overrun by the German army. So they're going to be overrun at 3+1 versus 2. So that's 4 for the Germans and 4 for the French and Brits. So the British one will take that blow, and the Germans will also have to take take a damage, lose an army. So the Germans are badly in need of some reinforcements here. This plane will go back to Lorraine, where it can cover all the territories. So while the Luftwaffe has air superiority, they don't have ground superiority for sure. This is as you probably figured out, I'm kind of playing around with some of the options in this game. I'm not necessarily doing the most historically plausible thing. I think it works out, but we'll see. Okay, so that was a German offensive. I think to respond, the UK will put a plane into action in London. Does that make the most sense? You could also have a French attempt to mobilize, but that probably isn't a good idea right now because they're so unstable. So Germany, as a response, is it for their interrupt. They can play for maneuvers. They'll probably get it, but they don't have anything to maneuver really, except to put something into play. I guess they better go for it. Okay, so they'll go for the maneuvers. They make it, and they'll put an army into the reserve. France is able to go now, and they're going to... Geez, France is a tough situation here. France is going to go for propaganda, because they're just going to need to focus on staying alive. And they make it. France is now at steady, despite having German occupation of much of their country. The Germans are going to interrupt by putting this guy back in Lorraine. And we might do this war part 2. See what happens. Oh, another German troop. Boy, this could be pretty bad for the old French. Let's see if they can get it. Okay, here's that offensive they're wanting. Okay, so they'll augment by 1 for another push on Paris. UK is able to, with their new plane, defend against this. So it's going to be at 2+1 for the Germans versus 2 for the UK. Germans roll a 6, and it's a 6 for the English too. So both of them lose their plane. But that does mean they have 2+1 versus 2 attacking in Paris here. So 2+1 makes 8. They rolled a 6+6, which explodes for a 7, and that's +1 making an 8. The Parisians roll 6, which is a nice try, but it's not as good as an 8. So the Paris is forced to... the Parisians are forced to retreat to their last stronghold in Brittany. This could be a pretty short war here. The Germans gain 2 cubes, so they're up at 5 points now. So fascists are at 7. French are now at 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're at -2. So democracy is on the ropes, it appears. Germans get 2 flags for their triumph there. That wasn't actually a triumph, literally, in game terms, but it was a victory. They'll gain a flag into the Action Cup and 1 into the reserve. And UK will... France will take 2 stability hits. 1, 2. Okay, they passed 1 of them. That's good. So they still probably won't collapse immediately. But if the Germans can knock out Brittany, it won't matter if they are super stable. They'll just lose. Put this in Action Cup. Fleet. And then I don't want to put that. That was stupid. That offensive was used. I can't put it into the Action Cup. Okay, so draw again. A British flag. Geez, what are the British going to do with this? I mean, British maneuvers just aren't that useful right now, it seems like. Alright, well, the British will go for maneuvers. What the hell? They don't make it. That might not have been smart. Germany could... They'll try and go for maneuvers, too. They'll succeed. And then they'll invade Brittany with these 2 units. So it's going to be 2 versus 2. There's no air forces left. 5 versus 6. Okay, that means the French have the advantage, and the Germans are forced to retreat with no casualties to either side. Okay, what else we got? Ooh, a plane. Let's put that in Paris. And what else? Oh, the French have a plane, but they don't have anywhere to put it. So I guess they'll put this here in case they can take Paris back. But they're probably toast. I mean, because they can't build this plane in Brittany. There's no production. There's no LLC from a production site. So here's the Italian home front. Let's see how they do. They roll a 6. They make it. So Italy. What the heck is Italy even doing here? I mean, I guess they'll prepare to. Well, it'd be nice for Italy if they could invade France, but they can't really. So I guess they'll put this guy here and prepare for an attack in Egypt, perhaps. These boats are okay in Rome. Here's the French home front, just what they needed. The French fail it, so if the French take one more stability hit, they're out. Not much redeployment the French can do here. I guess they can put this cruiser up here in Brittany, but not much point. Okay, drawing again. Crisis. So this is going to be a wartime crisis. And I've got the table right here. The crisis number is 3-2. So that's Chinese resistance, no effect. And I think we have one more crisis happening in 1938, right? Oh no, that was the final crisis. But there are four German chits in there, so that crisis, the Chinese resistance, didn't actually happen. This goes back to the Action Cup, and we continue with the turn. Here's a British flag. The British really need an offensive so they can invade the Ruhr, but I guess they'll go for maneuvers again. Okay, they make it. So they'll put this tank here. If a British offensive goes really well, they could maybe break out of Paris and into Berlin. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Here's a German flag. Germany would sure like to go for maneuvers to grab some more units. Maybe it'd be best to bank this in case we can get a you know what I just realized is the mobilization of the United Kingdom and should have irritated Italy. So I think we're going to put this Il Duce into play because, man, I'm just missing rules left and right here. I'm sorry. But, yeah, so the British just went. So then the fascists are going to try to get to an alliance. Okay, the fascist alliance fails, unfortunately for them. This blue plane still can't be deployed. Here's the UK home front. So they're rolling 3. They make a 6. -1 makes it. So they succeed. Redeployment. Is there any real redeployment to be done here? I mean, if Brittany falls, that's the end of the scenario. So I guess they really need to keep that tank there because there's really no hope of defending Brittany if the Germans have free reign there. As long as that tank is there, there's some armor superiority from the British that does threaten them a bit. Yeah, jeez. Okay. I was just trying to see if there's any possibility of a UK offensive soon. So the UK's gamble is this: if they put their tank back in London, they could do an invasion of the Ruhr, but they can't do that with flags alone because they'll need 2 military actions for one of those invasions. Invading the Ruhr in Berlin would be a big blow to Germany, and doing enough damage will win the scenario for them. But I think they better be conservative and keep this tank here, just in case. Oh, here's that French fortress. Now, I don't think they have a way to place this fortress right now. I think they have to reject it, actually. Okay, let me look up the rule here. It's 3.7.2 about fortresses. Yeah, they would have to place it at a production site, so they just have no way to place this fortress, unfortunately. Not a good sign for France. Another German offensive. So the likelihood of actually killing this tank and everything is not high, but I think they'll still go for it because they really want to do all the damage they can here. Okay, so they're going to go for a German operation at +1 augmentation. Because they have air superiority, but the enemy has armor superiority, it'll be 2 + 1 versus 2. So 2 + 1 is 7, and the 2 is a 5. That means the enemy takes 1 hit. That's 1 hit to the tank, and that was pretty much what we needed here. Here's a German flag. They're going to say screw the alliance and go for maneuvers. They make it. So that it kills these cubes of shame. They'll attack again. So that's 3 versus 2 in this case. 3 makes 6, and 2 makes 5. So the British lose their last guy here. There's nowhere for them to retreat to. I mean, they can't retreat, so it's getting dire for the French. It's just that one army in Brittany holding on. Here's a French flag. God, what are they going to do with it? I guess they'll do propaganda. Oh, they succeed, so they're wavering now. Here's a German flag. Okay, try maneuvers again. They succeed. Do the same attack again. 3, that's a 5, versus 2. That's a 6. Ah, dang. The French hold them off. So that's a lot of attacks into Brittany that haven't succeeded, to the French credit. And here's the final crisis. The only thing left is an Italian army. Wow, that was an eventful 1938. So the German army is perhaps overstretched, but controls most of France at this point. Italians are not in the war. The United Kingdom has no armies left at all. Boy, I've seen better situations for them. Okay, we'll throw these in the cup. We'll do that next time. So I'm going to cut this video and see you again.